Christ, it won't shoot. That is what American sailors called it. For 44 years, the United States Navy bolted a 6-barreled Gatling gun to the deck of nearly every warship in the fleet, called it the last line of defense against incoming missiles, and watched it fail every single time it was needed. In 1987, 2 Iraqi Exocet missiles slammed into the frigate USS Stark and killed 37 sailors. The Phalanx was on board, but it had been switched off. In 1991, during Desert Storm, a Phalanx locked onto the wrong target and shot the battleship USS Missouri instead of the incoming missile. In 1988, an Iranian Harpoon missile flew straight at the cruiser USS Wainwright. The Phalanx was in full automatic mode. It never fired. A safety mechanism had been set wrong, creating a blind spot exactly where the missile was coming from. 3 real-world engagements, 3 failures, 0 missiles destroyed, 44 years, 900 systems installed across 24 countries, and not one confirmed kill against a hostile missile at sea. Then on January 30th, 2024, an Iranian-designed cruise missile tore through the Red Sea at 600 miles per hour, penetrated every outer layer of a United States Navy destroyer's defenses, and reached within 1 nautical mile of USS Gravely, a $2 billion warship carrying 329 crew. At that distance, the missile was approximately 4 seconds from impact. And the weapon that stopped it, the weapon that fired a 3-second burst of tungsten penetrators and shredded that missile before it could kill everyone on board, was a system designed in the 1970s to fight Soviet missiles in a war that never happened. But to understand how a Gatling gun that had never worked became the only thing standing between 329 sailors and an Iranian warhead, you need to go back to the night that created it. October 21st, 1967. The night the rules of naval warfare changed forever. On that night, Egyptian missile boats fired 4 Soviet-designed Styx missiles at the Israeli destroyer Eilat from 17 nautical miles away. The crew never saw them coming. All 4 hit. 47 Israeli sailors died. The ship broke apart and sank. It was the first warship in history sunk by guided anti-ship missiles, and it terrified every navy on the planet. Ships had no automated defense against small, fast, sea-skimming cruise missiles, and the Soviet Union was building thousands of them. The problem was straightforward, but almost impossible to solve. A cruise missile traveling at 600 miles per hour covers 1 nautical mile in about 6 seconds. By the time a human operator sees the threat, identifies it, aims a weapon, and fires, the missile has already hit the ship. At terminal defense ranges, human reaction time is not slow. It is irrelevant. The only answer was a weapon that could do everything on its own. Search, detect, track, fire, kill, all without a human touching anything. What the Navy needed was a robot that could shoot down a missile in the last few seconds before impact. And in the early 1970s, General Dynamics started building one. They took the M61 Vulcan, a 6-barreled rotary cannon already flying on American fighter jets since 1959, and wrapped an entire combat system around it. A search radar on top scans for incoming threats. When it finds one, a tracking radar locks on. The gun fires tungsten penetrators at 4,500 rounds per minute, 75 rounds every second, and here is the part that makes the Phalanx different from every other gun on the ship. It tracks both the incoming missile and its own bullets at the same time. If the rounds are missing, it adjusts aim automatically. According to naval ordnance records, the 3rd bullet out of the barrel is typically on target. The whole system is self-contained. Radar, computer, gun, and ammunition drum all sit inside a single white housing that weighs about 6 tons. Sailors call it R2-D2 because it looks exactly like the Star Wars droid. It carries 1,550 rounds. At full rate of fire, that is roughly 20 seconds of ammunition. Every burst counts. And at 4,500 rounds per minute, the gun does not sound like a gun. Individual shots blur into a single sustained metallic scream that sailors describe as a buzzsaw or a chainsaw. The vibration travels through the steel hull of the ship. A typical engagement lasts 2 to 3 seconds. Then, silence. For the crew, that sound carries a very specific meaning. When the Phalanx fires, it means every other defensive system on the ship has failed. The missiles that can kill a threat at 90 miles did not stop it. The missiles that engage at 30 miles did not stop it. Electronic warfare did not fool it. The buzzing of that Gatling gun is the sound of the absolute last chance. If Phalanx also fails, the missile hits the ship. The first prototype was installed on the destroyer leader USS King in 1973. A refined version passed testing aboard USS Bigelow in 1977. Production was approved in 1978. The first operational system went aboard the aircraft carrier USS Coral Sea in 1980. The Phalanx was officially the United States Navy's last line of defense against anti-ship missiles. But it was designed to fight the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union never attacked. The massive carrier-killing missile salvos that Phalanx was built to stop never came. Instead, the system sat on the decks of warships for decade after decade, waiting for a war that everyone assumed would never happen. And when it was finally needed, it failed. The USS Stark disaster on May 17, 1987, was the worst. An Iraqi Mirage fighter fired 2 Exocet missiles at the frigate in the Persian Gulf. The crew was not at battle stations. The first Exocet warhead failed to detonate, but its rocket fuel burned through the crew's sleeping quarters at 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Men were incinerated in their bunks. The second one exploded, blowing a hole in the hull large enough to drive a car through. 37 sailors died, most of them asleep when the first missile hit. The ship's Phalanx was on board and fully functional, but it was in standby mode. The chaff launchers were not armed. The .50 caliber machine guns were not loaded. Nobody had switched anything on. The investigation destroyed the Navy's confidence in its own readiness, but it also planted a question that would haunt the Phalanx for the next 37 years. Even if the system had been switched on, would it have worked? The answer kept coming back the same way. In Operation Praying Mantis in 1988, the Phalanx on USS Wainwright never fired because its safety cutout cams created a blind spot aligned with the incoming Iranian missile. In Desert Storm in 1991, a Phalanx on USS Jarrett locked onto chaff instead of the incoming Silkworm missile and fired into the battleship Missouri. The Silkworm was actually destroyed by a British Sea Dart missile from HMS Gloucester, the first validated ship-to-ship missile kill in combat history. The Phalanx had shot at the wrong target. By the 2000s, the backronym had spread across the fleet. Christ, it won't shoot. Congressional auditors questioned the system's effectiveness. The Government Accountability Office reported availability rates of only 72 to 81%. The enhanced ammunition designed to hit harder was found to increase the likelihood of feed jams. Defense analysts openly wondered whether the 20mm rounds were simply too small to stop modern missiles. And still, nobody could prove the system worked, because it had never been tested in actual combat. If the idea of 329 lives depending on a weapon that had never worked is keeping you watching, hit subscribe. This channel covers the stories behind the weapons, the ships, and the decisions that history forgot. Because what happened next in the Red Sea is the reason the Phalanx still exists today. On October 19, 2023, 12 days after Hamas attacked Israel, Houthi rebels in Yemen began launching missiles and drones at ships in the Red Sea. The destroyer USS Carney detected and intercepted 4 cruise missiles and 15 drones in a single 10-hour engagement. It was the opening act of what Admiral Brad Cooper, commander of United States Naval Forces Central Command, would later describe as the most sustained combat the Navy had seen since World War II. The Houthi arsenal was supplied by Iran's Revolutionary Guard and was far more sophisticated than anyone had expected. Anti-ship cruise missiles based on Chinese designs traveled at nearly the speed of sound. The Houthis also fired anti-ship ballistic missiles, becoming the first force in history to use them in combat. Drones had ranges exceeding 1,500 kilometers. Unmanned surface vessels were packed with explosives. By January of 2025, the Navy had defended against approximately 400 drones and missiles, expending over 200 interceptor missiles and costing roughly $1 billion. The cost asymmetry was staggering. The Navy was firing $2 million standard missiles at drones that cost a few $1,000s each. USS Carney alone conducted 51 engagements over 235 days, earning its crew the first Combat Action Ribbon awarded to a warship's crew since the 1991 Gulf War. The Gravely's Phalanx burst, by contrast, cost approximately $7,000 in ammunition. But on that night, it was the only thing that mattered. But on January 30th, 2024, something went wrong. An anti-ship cruise missile got through. USS Gravely was an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, one of the most advanced warships on the planet. Her Aegis combat system carried standard missiles capable of intercepting threats at ranges beyond 90 miles. Previous Houthi missiles had been shot down at 8 miles or more. Gravely carried 329 crew and was valued at over $2 billion. At approximately 11:30 that night, a cruise missile launched from Houthi-controlled Yemen was detected heading for the ship. The missile was almost certainly a variant of the Chinese-designed C-802, an Iranian copy known as the Noor, carrying a 165-kilogram semi-armor-piercing warhead and traveling at roughly 600 miles per hour, just meters above the waterline. What happened next has not been fully explained. The missile penetrated every outer layer of Gravely's defenses. Whether the standard missiles were fired and missed, whether the sea-skimming profile delayed detection, whether electronic warfare measures failed, none of this has been officially disclosed. A senior defense official told Navy Times only this: obviously not an optimal situation if the close-in weapon system had to make the kill. The missile reached 1 nautical mile from the ship. At 600 miles per hour, that is approximately 4 seconds from impact. The Phalanx Close-In Weapon System, the last line of defense, the weapon system that had failed every time it was needed for 44 years, activated automatically. The white dome swiveled, the 6 barrels spun up, and the system fired. A burst lasting roughly 2 to 3 seconds. 75 tungsten penetrators per second, each a dense 15mm dart traveling at 3,600 feet per second. The closed-loop radar tracked both the outgoing rounds and the incoming missile simultaneously, walking the stream of fire onto the target. The missile disintegrated. 0 injuries and 0 damage to the ship. 329 sailors never felt the impact that was 4 seconds away from killing them. Retired Navy Captain Carl Schuster calculated afterward that at 600 miles per hour, the missile was so close that had Phalanx failed, the crew would not have had time to brace. The warhead was a 165-kilogram semi-armor-piercing charge. What that does to a destroyer was proven on USS Stark, where a similar-sized warhead killed 37 men and nearly sank the ship. USS Cole showed it with a suicide boat in 2000. A 40 by 60-foot hole in the hull, 17 dead. It was the first confirmed combat kill by a Phalanx Close-In Weapon System at sea in the system's entire 44-year operational history. A weapon designed in the early 1970s for Soviet missiles that never came had just saved a $2 billion warship from an Iranian-designed missile fired by Yemeni rebels. The ship itself was named after Vice Admiral Samuel Gravely, the first African-American to command a United States Navy warship in combat. The threat Phalanx was built for never materialized. The threat that almost killed 329 Americans was one nobody imagined when the system was designed. In May of 2025, Raytheon officially confirmed the intercept, stating that the Phalanx had directly saved over 300 sailors. In September of that year, the Navy awarded Raytheon a $205 million contract for continued Phalanx production through 2029, explicitly citing the Red Sea combat success. But the story does not end with vindication. The Phalanx also exposed a problem that the Navy cannot ignore. The Houthi cruise missiles were relatively unsophisticated, subsonic, and based on decades-old Chinese technology. Modern Russian and Chinese anti-ship missiles travel at Mach 2, Mach 5, and some at Mach 8. At Mach 8, a missile covers 1 nautical mile in 0.6 of a second. No Gatling gun on Earth has that kind of reaction time. The Navy is already testing high-energy laser systems as potential successors, but those systems have not yet proven they can destroy a cruise missile in flight. For now, on the decks of warships across 24 navies, more than 900 white domes sit and wait. They scan the horizon 75 times a minute. They carry 20 seconds of ammunition. They operate without human input, because at the ranges they are designed to fight, a human being is too slow. Most of them will never fire in anger. Most will be replaced by lasers or decommissioned with the ships they sit on. But every one of them exists because of a night in 1967 when 4 missiles hit a ship that had no way to stop them, and because of an engineering team in the 1970s who decided that a Gatling gun with a radar could solve the problem. For 44 years, sailors called them "Christ, it won't shoot." And on a dark night in the Red Sea, one of them did. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Leave a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Our community stretches across the entire world. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you are here. Click the video on the left to watch this ugly ship destroy a whole fleet.